Hello, everybody. Good morning, and welcome to our weekly media briefing with Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich, and also our public health update. Joining us today is Health Officer Dr. Keisha Davis, as well as Mr. Sean O'Donnell, who is Program Administrator, Public Health Emergency Preparedness and Response for the Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, and we have two special guests this morning. Ben Stevenson, who is Substance Use Prevention and Harm Reduction Manager for the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as Dr. Rolando Santiago, who is a Chief Behavioral Health and Crisis Services, also from the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm Lorna Virgilla, Hispanic Public Information Officer. Members of the media, do remember to use the chat during the Q&A portion of this presentation. And with that, good morning, Mr. County Executive.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry to wake you up so early. Again, thank you for joining us again this week. This media briefing is occurring a little bit earlier than normal. The reason is we are accommodating a visit by Governor Wes Moore, who's coming to Gaithersburg today. He's going to help join us at the Seneca Village Apartments on Clopper Road to help celebrate the opening of a new solar project. This is the largest rooftop solar project tied to an affordable housing, multifamily housing project in the county. Seneca Village Apartments is home to 684 units. This is not a small thing. Brings renewable energy options to hundreds of families that may have wanted to do this sooner, but were unable to. Montgomery County's Green Bank played a crucial role in helping to obtain the financing for this project to make the conversion to solar energy. Property owners received a $5 million Green Bank investment and then spent another $6.4 million to install the rooftop panels. And the energy saving is estimated to be about 2.5 million kilowatts annually. The Green Bank's an essential tool in helping all kinds of businesses go green. And our recommended budget this year includes $20 million to accelerate green efficiency, renewable energy, and clean energy investment throughout the county. In 2022 alone, the Green Bank helped collaborate on nearly 50 unique transactions, helping 27 homeowners and 19 commercial properties begin their conversion to green energy. So for those of you who've wondered if this is possible at this scale or on commercial properties, we're already seeing evidence that it's possible at this scale and on commercial properties. Those changes are going to help about 1,500 households eliminate 5,299 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions every year. Projects like the one the governor is going to see today save energy, create healthy living and work environments, and they foster a more resilient economy and environment. So it helps the county achieve its climate goals. And, frankly, it helps contribute globally to what we have to do to achieve our goals. I will say one of the most important things about Montgomery County doing this kind of work is it's an example that other people can follow. I've been in meetings where people, other government officials included, were uncertain about how you go forward and are the things that we're doing, have questions about the kind of things we're doing. And people have been surprised that the county was able to do the things, and often at lower costs. So, our being able to do this is actually helping other jurisdictions in the region understand that they can do the same things. And, we're not naive about this. We're not going to solve global warming by ourselves. We're only going to solve it when this is something that everybody is starting to tune into. I want to change topics now and just talk about fentanyl issues in the county. As you can see from the chart we're going to put up here, for the last few months, the county's has been working to heighten awareness when it comes to drug use among school-age children and teens. You look at the chart above, you can see how opioid poisoning has grown. Kind of peaked in 2017, and then it trended downward a little bit. But in FY22, it spiked, and so far this year, we're well exceeding what happened last year, and that we're only, in April now? We've got 8 more months to go this year. So this is not good news. It's a lot of people being involved, and we need to figure out how you can tamp this down, which is not easy. Several forums on dangers of fentanyl have been hosted in the county for families in the community by MCPS and Montgomery Goes Purple in response to increased drug use and overdoses. A recent study by the University of Michigan found as many as 1 in 4 middle and high school students across the country may be abusing popular stimulants like Adderall and Ritalin used to treat ADHD. A monthly look at drug-related issues in Montgomery County found a 90% increase from last year to this year in opioid-related emergency department visits by minors. And that jump went from 36 cases last year to 69, like I said, 69 so far this year. And it comes as community health professionals reporting new patterns of drug use in which teens order what they want through social media with little detection until there is a problem. This is going to be extraordinarily difficult until we get to the people who are supplying these drugs and to the people who are manufacturing them. Was, encouraged, we'll be talking a little bit about money we got from the opioid settlements that are occurring, but I am deeply disappointed that nobody went to jail. I mean, the owners of these companies made decisions and encouraged decision-making that put these drugs into the hands of millions of people and resulted in thousands of deaths. And it's astounding that apparently if you're a white-collar criminal, you can kill people. There are no consequences for your actions except for paying a fine. That is not the way justice should have been administered. And, my personal view is the owners of these companies belong in jail, and the pharmacists and the other people who facilitated this belong in jail. They've done enormous damage to the community in terms of loss of lives and the damage to families. And just paying a fine is, it's better than nothing, but it's not much more than a joke at this point. In Montgomery County, police show up for every overdose, whether it's fatal or not. And we're one of the only jurisdictions in the state that does this. Police say they've learned through investigations that young drug users are now commonly asking for pills laced with fentanyl, a dangerous element that not long ago was accidentally found in pills, leading to a spike in adult overdoses. It's especially dangerous because fentanyl is not necessarily manufactured under strict guidance to, in terms of quality control. So the request for pills of fentanyl is only encouraging more people to produce fentanyl illegally and to manufacture more pills illegally. In 2013, fentanyl was responsible for a little more than 24 deaths per year in Maryland. In 2016, it killed 1,100 people in the state. By 2020, it was the runaway deadliest threat in the drug market, accounting for 2,300 deaths in Maryland. So what do we do about this? The work's already begun. A combination of education and drug prevention programs helps us bring the over number of fatal doses down, at 29% from 21 to 22. But some of that can be attributed to the saturation of Narcan as a quick response in more overdose cases. Narcan can save a person from an overdose, but it's not a cure. We know that many people overdose once, they're revived by Narcan, and they continue to take the drug. And we've known for a while that people are actually multiple Narcan users. And it is frightening that people put themselves at risk. And there's no guarantee that somebody around is always going to have Narcan when the person's doing this. So it really is something that people are going to have to pay a lot more attention to. Parents are going to have to pay a lot more attention to their kids, and the schools are going to have to make sure we don't have environments that facilitate transactions where these things can be sold in schools. As we continue to receive money from the opioid settlements, more money is going to be devoted to this fight. And at this time, I'd like to bring Ben Stevenson on, who's the Substance Use Prevention and Harm Reduction Manager. I'd like Ben to talk to you about our programs and our methods for intervention before we take some questions on this topic.
Thank you, County Executive. Happy to be with you this morning. Again, I'm Ben Stevenson, Prevention and Harm Reduction Manager for the county. So I oversee all of our substance use prevention, education, and awareness programs, as well as work with a lot of community partners to try to prevent and delay the onset of substance use. So some of that programming entails working with law enforcement as far as promoting events like National Drug Take Back Day, which is actually happening this Saturday. So if you have any old and unused prescription medications, you can safely dispose of those this Saturday via one of the locations with them. We also do a lot of work around, we have a program that we sponsor as far as a family educational program. It's an evidence-based curriculum that is implemented by one of our partners to educate parents about the dangers of substance use and trying to build up protective factors within the family. We also do a lot of work in the peer space, working with young people within the county through our Youth Ambassadors program, building them up to build up their leadership skills, giving them opportunities to portray those skills within the community, educating their peers about the dangers of substances, how to advocate for themselves, not only looking at substance use, but also looking at mental health as well. And then we also do a lot of work as far as community awareness. One key piece of prevention is community awareness through campaigning, through via social media, through television advertising, trying to educate about the dangers of these substances. So looking at also in harm reduction, oversee, we do a lot of Narcan training, of course, which is one of our efforts that we have been doing since 2014, as far as trying to educate people about the dangers of opioids, how to respond to an opioid overdose, identifying the signs and symptoms, and administering Narcan, as well as expansion as of almost 3 years ago now, with the inception of the Syringe Services Program, working with clients who are dealing with substance use disorder, providing within a compassionate, non-judgmental environment to engage in services and programs to hopefully keep them alive until they're ready to actually take that journey into pursuing their treatment and recovery. And then in addition to that, providing fentanyl test strips in the community, hopefully as a harm reduction tool to prevent people from experiencing those overdoses, so that they'll know that whatever they're using has fentanyl in it. We basically have gotten to where we are today based on what the county executive shared about how pharmaceutical companies educated or miseducated the community and the American people around the dangers of these drugs. And so the DEA did a big study around opioids and how many prescription medications were ordered in pharmacies throughout the country. And we were able to pull out data looking at specifically Montgomery County pharmacies and how that increased over the course of 2006 to 2012, because following the data, we noticed that about 70% of all people who have become addicted to an opioid medication now started off with a prescription pain pill that was potentially prescribed by a doctor. And of course, that doctor was misinformed about the dangers and the addictiveness of these prescription medications. And so now we're in this space of fentanyl, which is something that is highly hard to detect in prescription medications. They're being pushed into counterfeit pills looking exactly like the Percocets you might get from a doctor, like the Adderall a person might get from a doctor, and like the Xanaxes you maybe get from a doctor, or even pressed to look similar to like ecstasy or Molly and things like that. And so we're educating a lot of young people, which I fortunately had the opportunity to speak to a high school senior class this morning about the dangers of these substances and how you cannot trust your eyes looking at these medications to tell if they have fentanyl in them or not. And then we also, distribute the fentanyl test strips as a tool to prevent, overdoses and so a person will know if their substance is laced with fentanyl or not. But even with pill medications, a person may, shave off a piece of the pill. It may test negative for fentanyl, but the other portion of the pill could be concentrated with fentanyl. We're doing this. We're doing these educational events with MCPS. We're currently in the process of doing an educational event with Montgomery College, with the universities of Shady Grove, because we've noticed that initially our populations that we were targeting were accessing medications from like the medicine cabinet, from doctors, from pharmacies, and now they're accessing it via social media. And so trying to educate these different populations about the dangers of these substances is important, but it's an all hands on deck effort. And of course, we're about to receive, some additional opioid funding to support these efforts and hopefully expand upon what we've been doing. Everything we've been doing in this space has been data driven. So following the data, making sure we're looking and keeping an eye on the hot spots of within the county and doing targeted efforts in these different areas around the county, just to try to educate, equip people, and make them more aware of these substances and the dangers. Because the whole idea is to hopefully keep them safe and hopefully get them to a place of pursuing their treatment and recovery, just because we know how powerful and potent these medications are and how addictive they can be.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. We're going to open it up. By the way, welcome Dr. James Bridgers, Acting Director of Health and Human Services. Good morning to you. We are going to open this portion of a presentation for some questions and answers regarding the response to the recent drug overdose statistics. So members of the media, use a chat. This is your opportunity to ask questions regarding this particular topic.
While people are going into the chat, I just want to add that the council and I wrote a letter to Governor Moore asking for a treatment facility. There are no treatment facilities in the state of Maryland for youth, and we clearly need treatment facilities. The state of mental health in the state has long been a disaster. Our jail is the largest mental health clinic anywhere, and we've got, I think, close to 70 patients who absolutely are not supposed to be in a jail, but there were no beds in any hospitals to put them. And you're talking about people where a person in the jail has to sit across from that person all day long, 24/7. This is not a good situation to be in, and we need help. And we're not the only jurisdiction that needs this kind of support.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Members of the media, any questions on this particular topic?
This is Milagros Melendez. Hi, Lorna.
Hi, good morning, Milagros, El Tiempo Latino. Go ahead.
Yes. As the executive has said, there is a great responsibility of the companies that manufactures these opioids. And talking about treatments, there is a need of the detox centers. There are only private ones, and parties are crying out for that. What are the responsibility, or what are the steps that the county has to take to have those treatment centers that Mr. Early was talking about?
I can take that if you like.
Yeah.
So as the county executive mentioned, there was a letter that has been sent to the governor. The governor has responded positively. We alerted in that letter that there is this need in the state, not just in the county, but in the state, for inpatient detox residential facility, stabilization facility. So there are plans. We're refining that concept. We'd like to go back to the governor, have conversations with his staff, get the support that we need, possibly offer it statewide as well, but we need it here in the county as well.
I was told that there are 30 centers in the wide state. I mean, I just wanted to make sure, does the state has centers like that right now or no? The state?
Not for inpatient detox facilities for youth. We're talking about the youth population.
Okay, so none. All right, thank you so much. My second question is regarding the legal issues, the fact that the prosecution has softened some crimes of young people could be a factor for this. I was talking with a mother who has a 17-year-old son who not only does drugs, but also sells it. And she has called the police. And the police said that, so that's what the mother said. The police cannot arrest him because he is a minor. So, and And can somebody explain me that? And if it is that the case, what can it be done?
Who would like to take that question?
Yeah, I can start here.
Potter?
So there were changes in the juvenile arrest requirements in the state of Maryland, such that high level offenses, I believe 13 and younger, can't be charged in the same way. Now, distribution of a controlled dangerous substance would not qualify for those protections, so those would be crimes that a juvenile could be arrested for. Now, the police department has taken the stance that we're not really interested in arresting people for possession. Distribution is a little bit different, but even in the case of a juvenile, if they were a distributor or a low-level dealer, but they were connected to a much bigger distributor, the inclination from the police department has always been to go after the adults who are driving this. Obviously, this entire network is not driven by juveniles or children. It's being driven by adults who then use, what's often referred to as, they have lower level dealers who are minors because they know that the limits on prosecuting minors exist. And so the police department would, I'm assuredly, love to work with this family to try and address who is getting those drugs to that minor and driving that distribution, and going after that person, that adult, or somewhere up the chain there is an adult, and going after the adults that are driving this issue much more than prosecuting juveniles, because frankly, they need help, not prosecution.
What amount is considered to prosecute? What amount does
it? If we're talking about, it depends what we're talking about here. So marijuana obviously is a different. Cannabis is different than anything involving opioids and fentanyl, and so without knowing the specifics of the case, I think obviously the limits on cannabis are something like, I think 10 grams is really where they start to look at anything above that, but it would depend on the substance that was being discussed as to whether how it would qualify. Now, obviously, fentanyl, very low levels are fatal, and so the amount of fentanyl-laced pills or things that you would have to have in your possession to be charged with potential distribution are much smaller. But we could get to the specifics. I don't have them off the top of my head for all of the controlled dangerous substances, but I certainly be willing to get you in contact with the police department who could lay out exactly how that varies by drug type.
Thank you. My last question, who can tell me if do you think that this softening this crime on young people has been the factor for increasing crimes, or at least drug crimes?
I'm quite confident that some of my Health and Human Services colleagues would. So, a few things. I think that drug use is a reflection of the underlying mental health and behavioral health challenges that we often face in the county, and those two are linked in some ways to the crime that we see. They're all part and parcel of the same challenges that young people face in the mental and behavioral health space in many cases. So I don't necessarily know that the drug-seeking behavior is necessarily driving all of the crime or even most of the crime. I think it's all a reflection of challenges that our young people are facing. You see them being reflected in drug use, but you also see them reflected in criminal activity. And so obviously addressing the underlying mental and behavioral health deficits or challenges that young people face will help us address both drug use and criminality. Now, I think it is important to recognize that once someone begins to take a fentanyl or an opioid derivative, there is a physical addiction that occurs, and that can drive certain behaviors that, theft and things of that nature, because they are trying to address that physical dependence that they now feel. And so obviously there are multiple goals within our opioid efforts in Montgomery County. One of those is to prevent people from using in the first place, because once they start to use and become physically addicted, is much more challenging to address their physical and mental dependency. You see brain chemistry shifts with opioid use and things of that nature that are very difficult to undo and require intensive treatment. And so obviously we're trying to both help those who are already addicted while preventing more people from becoming addicted.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Milagros. I believe Emmanuel Villalobos from Telemundo 44 DC has some questions as well. Good morning, Emmanuel.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity. I have a question. I don't know if you have any chance to answer in Spanish. That would be great. And the question is, if you see more...
Emmanuel, your audio, it's kind of bad. We can barely hear you.
Give me 1 second.
Do you want to write the question in the chat, or is it... Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me better now?
Yes, you can do that. And I believe what he wanted was what you mentioned, Dr. Santiago, regarding the letter to the governor regarding rehab center, sound in Spanish. En español, lo que dijo en inglés. The same thing you said in English and Spanish.
Sí, un placer. Él se escribió una carta al gobernador hace como 3 semanas atrás. Estaba firmado por el ejecutivo que está aquí presente, Mark Elrich, y también los varios de los concejales de aquí del condado, y era pidiendo apoyo para tener un centro residencial para ayudar a los jóvenes que ya están adictos, para que puedan manejar su adicción y sobreponerse sobre ella. No existen en el estado de Maryland, no existen estos centros, así que estamos pidiendo respaldo y apoyo del gobernador para que podamos ofrecer ese tipo de servicio, y posiblemente no solamente para jóvenes de aquí del condado, pero estatalmente también.
Doctor Santiago, no sé si me escuchan bien ahorita.
Sí,
Un poquito.
cómo no.
Sí, disculpa, estoy en la redacción. Quería saber si este incremento en el uso de opioides lo han visto más marcado en comunidades latinas o este incremento es generalizado para todas las comunidades del condado.
Question is if the rise in the use is in the Latino community or across the board in other communities as well. Dr. Santiago?
Hay cierta evidencia que nos indica que la comunidad latina es vulnerable. Lo estamos viendo en algunas de las estadísticas, y por eso es que tenemos muchas personas, tenemos nuestros concejales que están alertas, tenemos líderes de la comunidad, tenemos las escuelas que están bien apercibidas a esta situación. Se han hecho varios foros en las escuelas, 3 de ellas. También hemos hablado con los padres, con los estudiantes. En estos foros se ha hecho en español también. O sea que estamos tratando de congregar todas los recursos que tenemos para poder responder a las necesidades que estamos viendo en la comunidad latina. Pero debo hacer hincapié que también está afectando muchas otras comunidades, no solamente la hispana, otras comunidades también, pero hay ciertos indicios de que nuestra comunidad hispana es vulnerable a esta situación que estamos confrontando.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I see that Olga Imbaquingo has her hand raised. Good morning, Olga. Tiempo Latino as well.
Buenos días, Lorna. Buenos días, señor Ehrlich. So sorry, in English. For Mr. Ehrlich, I have different questions on the fentanyl. I am interested to know what is your proposal, Mr. Eldridge, for the rent assistance once the federal fund assistance will end in May. And also we know that in Montgomery County,
Olga,
yes,
Olga, I'm sorry
yes,
to interrupt. We want to wrap it up regarding the opioids and the response to the fentanyl crisis, and then we move on to other questions, other topics. Since this is fentanyl assistance, we can do that right after.
I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Okay. Any more questions regarding this one topic, the response to the recent drug overdose statistics in the county? Members of the media, going once? Twice? All right. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson and Dr. Santiago, for joining us regarding this topic this morning. And Milagros, your hand is up again. Is this regarding fentanyl?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It was following the question, the previous question. Do we have any statistics that we can say how many of those deaths are from Latino community or different groups? Do we have that in glance?
I'll take that. There is some evidence, but we're not prepared yet to share the numbers because some of them are small, but they seem to indicate that the Latino community is especially vulnerable in this situation. But we can get back to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Milagros. Then we're going to move forward now with the rest of the public health update, and Olga will open it up in just a minute for additional questions related to other topics. Mr. County Executive.
All right. So moving on, I want to just talk a little bit about the budget and the school system for a moment. As the county is deliberating the FY24 budget recommendations, I want to thank all the community advocates, teachers, parents, labor unions, residents who understand the value of a good school system that testified on behalf of the MCPS budget requests and the needs we have in our school system, as well as the services and supports throughout the government. As we just discussed about our youth dealing with substance misuse, we have a lot of mental health issues, anxieties, as well as learning loss from the pandemic, and we have to invest, and the time has actually passed. As a former teacher, I understand that you can't kick the can down the road when it comes to the education of the children, and every day in the classroom is crucial. I think, a couple of things I think are worth noting. First of all, Montgomery County is now spending 80% per pupil of what it spent in 2010. So I get a lot of questions from people who talk about what the schools can't do and the schools were better. The schools had more staff, more resources available when they had more money. And you're now spending 80% of what you spent in 2010, while other jurisdictions continue to increase their spending. And the county made a one-time decision to reset the maintenance of effort during the Great Recession, but that became permanent. And, while it relieved us of a burden during the height of the recession, which the county would have been hard pressed to meet, we didn't change our policies as we moved out of that. We did not restore spending to pre-recession levels. And I think that's continued to have an impact on the school system. And I was in a forum the other night, and one of the residents, asked, well, what's the impact on people who don't have children? Why is it important? And I said, well, it's pretty simple. We all know about neighborhood churn. As people in neighborhoods, get older, the kids get older. At some point, they sell their houses in the neighborhood. Anybody in the real estate market will tell you that the school that kids go to and the schools the kids go to in general is something that affects home buying decisions. And homes that are perceived to be in a better county or in a better place within a county go for higher value than comparable homes someplace else. And I lived in Tacoma Park. I live in Tacoma Park, but I was living there when the city went through unification between Montgomery County. Part of the city was in both Montgomery and, the city is in Montgomery and was in PG. Prince George's, 2 different counties. The line was Carroll Avenue. And on one side of the line, in the Prince George's County side, the houses that were the same as the houses on the Montgomery County side sold for tens of thousands of dollars less, solely because of the schools. Because they had Tacoma Park Police, they had Tacoma Park Services, they had all the same resident services that every other resident in the city had, except for one thing, and that was the schools. And that had a real effect on values. So if you're older and you don't have kids and you wonder, why does this matter to you? Well, it matters because the day comes when you sell your home. If the perception of Montgomery County schools declines, it is going to be challenging to maintain the same values that we have today. So everybody in this county's got a stake in having a good school system. I would hope that you would look at this from the benefit for the children and, realize that the better educated and healthier children we raise, the better society and our communities are going to be. But if you just want to look at it from a strictly selfish point of view, you benefit when the schools are good and you suffer when the school perceptions decline. And we are working hard through the pandemic to make sure we bring the schools to where they need to be, which is the basis of why we had to make this increase in the budget. We had this unprecedented ask for a budget that would require 10 cents on the tax rate in order to fund. And there aren't places in the existing budget, because it would all be services we deliver to residents, to cut. We'd have to cut $222 million out of our services in order to make room for the school system. And so, the decision I made and recommended to the council is that we kind of restore our funding levels, get closer to the funding levels anyway. This will not even get us back to where we were before, but at least helps us address teacher pay, which is something that has fallen pretty far behind and has really impacted on recruitment in the school system. So I just wanted to add that. I'm looking forward to going out to the community. I've been out in the community for the last couple of weeks. We're going to continue to discuss the importance of not only the capital budget, which we're doing hearings on, but also the rest of the school budget, because the capital budget and the base operating budget are tied together. The more you borrow, the more money we spend. It either competes for other resources. It either allows us to maintain programs, or it forces us to decrease programs. And there are just some programs we shouldn't decrease. So moving on to brighter news, Montgomery County, again, there was a survey of WalletHub of the most diverse cities in the United States. Gaithersburg, Germantown, and Silver Spring ranked 1, 2, and 3 nationally, and Rockville was 13th. And I was able to witness firsthand how important it was to be the most jurisdiction in a diverse state. When I was recently in Taiwan, by having communities in Montgomery County from nearly every part of the world, we instantly connected globally to the global marketplace. And it was interesting, and I think I mentioned this last week, how many people that we met in the Taiwanese business community who actually either had companies, had worked in Montgomery County, lived in Montgomery County, been at FDA or NIH. So there's a large, overseas presence, and there's a knowledge of Montgomery County, which I think helps us when people are talking about if they're looking to expand into U.S. markets. We become a place that people are comfortable with considering. So I'm optimistic that we'll continue to benefit that. And I want to congratulate Germantown, Gaithersburg, and Silver Spring, and Rockville for the recognition again from WalletHub. Just yesterday, the world remembered the 6 million Jewish people killed in the Holocaust, and Yom HaShoah also honors those who survived one of the most horrific times of hate our world has ever seen. I was asked by the Jewish Community Relations Council to read some of the names of the victims for the Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's something they asked children or area leaders from across the DMV to participate in. And learning about the Holocaust is essential for our children, even though it's a challenging lesson to teach. For many people, it's the first time they're faced with the darkness we can find in this world. and how quickly hate can spread like wildfire. And I think America's had a little dose of how rapidly hate can spread over the last 8 years or so, 9, 10, 12 years or so. So it's a problem we face today, certainly not at the level of the Holocaust, but it is disturbing when people talk about other group, but the comments that came from that state meeting, where people were I don't know if reminiscing is the right word, about being able to take people out and hang them. We're in a dangerous place when people start thinking like that. You know, we comfort our children with the only silver lining we can find in this story, that we teach about it so it never happens again. And, you know, there are people who don't want us teaching about the Holocaust and deny that it ever happened. Through retelling these horrific stories, we can make a better world for a future generation, and or we can stop hate in its tracks before it can manifest. And so, you know, we're fortunate to live in a diverse county like this, where young people have the opportunity to know people of all walks of life and from all cultures. While we know the majority of our county feels empowered by this, the voices and levels of action from a few hateful people often seem to overpower the voices of love and acceptance. Every bad act seems like it just brings a dark shroud over everything. And, you know, for all the good stuff we do, it doesn't take much to make people feel insecure and worried. Every vigil and meeting I attend in response to hate is important, and I'm proud to see members of the faith community there, most members of the faith community. And it reminds me that there are more people opposed to hate than those who are perpetrating it. And I believe our community's going to continue to decry the kind of hateful messages that we've seen sprayed at schools and on bus trails and bus stops and left on driveways in the early morning. We have to say loudly that there is no place for hate here. I also want to acknowledge, we've had a wealth of celebrations over the past month. We've been to Ramadan festivities, been to Buddhist festivities, New Year festivities from cultures that celebrate New Year's in the spring, because their years were based around, I guess, the planting season and the renewal of life that is symbolized by spring. So there are different cultural practices where we all have more or less have a common calendar now for everyday life. I want to acknowledge Eid. Many practicing Muslims have been fasting for the last month in observation of Ramadan. And the breaking of the fast is both a literal and a symbolic act, with the idea that holding off hunger for most of the day, every day for a month, breaks all evil habits. And I've been fortunate to help celebrate Ramadan with several groups over the past 30 days. And I'd just like to say Eid Mubarak to our Muslim community who may be listening to this. On the COVID update, Tuesday we learned that older Americans and those with weakened immune systems now eligible for a COVID-19 booster shot. The Food and Drug Administration authorized the second bivalent booster for adults 65 and up and people who are immunocompromised. For older adults, a booster is recommended at least 4 months from a previous one, and those with weakened immune systems may need a booster shot every 2 months. For healthy younger people, new boosters are not yet needed, said the agency, and the FDA promised an updated recommendation for most of the adults and children early this summer. I will note that a lot of the vaccine companies continue to test their vaccines against new variants to make sure that the vaccine still offer some protection against the new variants. And, what's been pretty consistent is that vaccines may not prevent everybody from getting sick, but they've had a really serious effect on reducing hospitalizations and deaths. So if you're holding out and haven't received an initial 2-dose vaccine regimen, that's no longer necessary. The FDA has authorized the use of the updated booster as a starting point for those seeking a vaccine. So you don't have to make up every shot that you didn't get, but you can start with these new boosters that protect against the most current versions of Omicron. And these changes are waiting for approval by the CDC. In Montgomery County, our case counts and hospital numbers continue to fall. Our community level status remains low. On Tuesday, no ICU beds in any of our 7 regional hospitals were being used for a COVID-19 patient. That's big news. This week, we'll take our community health report from Kimberly Townsend before taking your questions. So I'll turn this over to the health people.
Good morning, Mr. County Executive. I'm stepping back in for Kimberly this morning.
I didn't think you looked like Kimberly.
So again, a very brief update on COVID. We continue to monitor impact globally. We have not seen a sharp uptick in most places around the world. India has reported some increases with one of the Omicron variants. In fact, it's a variant of the XBB that we've been seeing mostly here. That's XBB 1.16. This is being called now Arcturus. It's been given a name. And while there has been some increases in the percentage of cases, our overall number of cases remain very, very low. So there have been some reports of this. We continue to monitor it. There are some early reports that it may cause slightly different symptoms, particularly with younger people, itchy eyes, similar to conjunctivitis. But again, we have not seen a large number of cases of this locally, but we'll continue to monitor it. Again, the important things globally, we haven't seen a more significant severity with this than previous variants, but we'll keep tracking and hopefully it remains that way. Again, just to slightly update the figures we gave our county executive earlier today. We just got slightly updated. We're now below 1 hospital admission per 100,000 residents over a 7-day total. These just continue to trend down, which we're happy to see. And again, tracking on deaths through in April so far, reduced number of serious illness, serious death related to COVID, and we hope those will continue to trend down. With relation to the FDA news, we are waiting for the CDC's final approval, as well as the Maryland Department of Health's guidance, that the official guidance that comes out on administering it. That way we all administer it the same way across the state. But once that comes through, we'll very, very soon after that, our teams will be able to provide an additional booster dose, again, to those individuals that are recommended, which is following the FDA guidance will be individuals over 65 who have not received a booster in the last 6 months, and individuals who are immunocompromised the last 4 months, and individuals who are immunocompromised who have not received a booster in the last 2 months. But again, we'll wait to receive the specifics of that, and we'll be phasing out the monovalent vaccine at that time as well. So again, lots of places you can go around the county. Our partners and all of our health initiative programs continue to work with us to get the vaccines out at no cost to individuals. And there's lots of other places you can go to get testing or vaccination. So please, if you need one of those, continue to look, use our website. We'll keep updating it with the new guidance as well. Those are all the updates I have right now. Happy to turn it over to my colleagues, Dr. Davis or Dr. Bridgers, if they have anything additional from the public health side, or Dr. Stoddard from the rest of the county.
Well, thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Nothing else from my end to add. Dr. Bridgers?
Nothing from my end, Dr. Davis, Mr. O'Donnell.
I think we're going to go to questions.
All righty, so we're going to open it up for the Q&A portion of this presentation. Olga Imbarquingo from El Tiempo Latino, your question now regarding the rental assistance.
Good morning, Mr. Eldridge. I want to talk about the economic challenge for the disadvantaged families, in particular for Hispanic families. I want to know what is the your proposal for the rent assistance once the federal funds assistance will end in May. There is an immediate plan to avoid the evictions, for instance?
Mr. County Executive, can you
See
please
that?
unmute?
Yeah. This is a really difficult situation we're in. We don't even have the resources we had during COVID because the federal government obviously has disappeared as an actor in this space. And so I put $40 million in the budget to deal with rental assistance. It will help the lowest income families who are without jobs. It will not help everybody who is struggling to pay rent. It is not an unlimited amount of money. It is less than we had when we were getting money from the federal government. The county cannot take that on. It would have serious consequences for other parts of the budget to go beyond much where we are today. So we're doing more, probably putting more in than anybody else is, probably more in than what the state's putting in. But nothing happened at the state level to provide a lot more money toward this issue. So we're doing as much as we can do with the resources we have. I don't think anybody's satisfied, but putting this on the counties to deal with at a national level for a problem that, local people didn't make it's a little bit troubling. I will say that, I'm supporting the rent stabilization bill, the HOME Act that's been sponsored by Will Joando and Kristen Mink. It's the only bill that effectively limits rent increases. The rent increases will be limited basically to inflation, and an owner whose bills exceeded inflation can get increases to compensate them for that. But as a rule, the day-to-day increases would be tied to inflation. And for most landlords in the county, that would actually match the behavior that we've seen over the past 20 years. But for some landlords or particular circumstances where rents suddenly go up, this would offer an added level of protection against rent gouging that's not tied to increases in operating expenses. So I think, it's important for the council to consider this. The other bill has no cap on rents other than inflation plus 8%. And so to give you a perspective, if inflation stays at 5%, which is about where it is now, that would allow a 13% rent increase. Rents above 10% and higher are considered constructive eviction, meaning essentially if tenants face 10% rent increases, lower income tenants can't afford it. They're going to have to leave the apartments they're in. And the county has almost 50,000 households that spend half of their incomes on rent. And these are lower income households. It's way different if you're making, $1 million a year and you choose to spend half of your money on housing, you still have, $500,000 left over at the end of the day. But when you're making $50,000 a year and you're spending $25,000 on housing, by the time you take out taxes and everything, you don't have much left to meet the basic needs. So I'm very supportive of a bill that will actually meaningfully limit unjustified rent increases. Not all rent increases, but rent increases at a level that aren't justified by increased expenses. It's as simple as that.
Mr. Eldridge, obviously, housing is one of the big concerns. However, there are other needs are in risk for the community as well, like health, food, mental support. It's very notorious, not just in the county, around the country, there is an food insecurity. There is any contingency plan to support the families in those issues?
So we did a lot of food support work during COVID. We had federal reimbursement. We no longer have federal reimbursement. This budget has $6 million actually in the budget for food relief, with the understanding that because we don't know going forward how much of a hit we're going to be seeing this year. But we put $6 million in, and with the assumption that we'll pull more out of the reserves, if it looks like after the first quarter that $6 million is not going to get us through the year, we intend to go back and supplement it. So we acknowledge it, and again, $12 million, if that's what we spend over the year, is less than we were able to spend during the height of COVID when we were providing a lot of relief. So again, it's another frustrating limitation on what the county is able to do. We've increased funding for the minority health initiatives in the county, and so hopefully that will go. We're maintaining the hub model, which relied more on community groups to work with the county to deliver services, because we realized that the community groups did provide better access to communities than relying on only the county government to do this. Your outreach, the outreach from community newspapers, from community organizations, gets to people that county government, really struggles sometimes to reach. So we're going to continue to be doing that. So we're going to keep trying to keep things in the support sphere, understanding that some of it's going to be less than what it used to be because we no longer have any federal support.
Mr. Eldridge, I have a last question, and it's the follow-up of your proposal of 40 millions for housing. That will include for families, no matter what is their immigrant status?
Yes, our programs have not relied on immigrant status. As long as it's our money, that's not a question we have to ask.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eldridge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olga. I believe Jeannie Bixby from Local 360 has a couple of questions for you, Mr. County Executive. Good morning, Jeannie.
Good morning, Lorna. Thank you. Good morning, Mark. My first question for you is about the planning board probe that the results came out from the Washington Post last night, saying that there was not misconduct found from Casey Anderson. Do you have kind of a response to these findings? Have you had a chance to look at them?
I haven't had a chance to look at them, so I'll read them. I was not overly vexed by the interpersonal drama that occurred over there. Whether that's, that's not my issue. My issue is, the consistent violation of Open Meetings Acts, of, just carrying on processes over there that are not the best practices of Montgomery County. And, he was found multiple times for violating Open Meetings Act requirements and simply said he didn't care and he thought the people were wrong and he should be able to do what he was doing. That's kind of indicative of other things that went on over there that I don't think would qualify as a hostile workplace. I also want to see who they talked to and if, how that matches up with, who was complaining. And if they're only probing that incident, that's not really much of a probe.
Thank you. And then my other question for you is about Councilmember Friedson's bill that he's proposing that would eliminate the Office of the People's Counsel. From the commentary from members of your office yesterday at the council meeting, I'm getting the view that this is not something that you would support. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely not. The OLO report said the same thing. This is a step back, and they said what the only people it helps is the developers. The whole point of a People's Council wasn't to make people's cases for them, but to support the community. When the average person in a community doesn't understand zoning, doesn't understand a whole myriad of things in the planning environment. When I was younger and I first started getting involved in things, I spent weeks learning how to read traffic studies and analyze traffic studies because nobody in the community group could look at a traffic study and tell whether it was true or not true. And so, learning about how to do that is not something that most people make. So the Office of the People Council was intended to help people. This bill masquerades as something that's supposed to help people that actually will not help people. And the idea of residents continuing to have to go into all these hearings with no support in a meaningful way, while developers are free to spend thousands or more hiring lawyers and consultants, is really, really frustrating. We've got something, we all know what that bill was intended to do, and the bill that's being proposed doesn't do what the original bill was intended to do. It's like wink, wink, nod, nod. We'll do a little bit, but nothing that's really going to mess with your ability to control the dialogue.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Ginny. I do not see any more questions from members of the media on the chat. Does anybody else have any questions for the officials this morning? Going once, going twice.
Excuse me.
Oh, okay, Tom.
Yes, Tom Sherwood.
Hey, Tom.
Wow.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Well, I'm pretty good, except I was trying to listen to your planning, the report on the planning board.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand it. Did you say you have not yet seen the report?
No, I mean, I got a text this morning that I should look at it, but I didn't have time to look at it before I got on this call.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts about who should be the planning board chair?
I'm not going to share them right now.
Well, then I won't take any more time.
There's some interesting non-former county employees who I think might make good planning board chairs, and certainly interesting non-council employees.
And are you concerned that, well, if you haven't read the report, how hard to ask this question, but are you concerned about the director who was fired in her possibility of suing the county, being liable for lawsuits?
Which director was fired?
I'm sorry, her name is skipped my mind just as I started to ask you. Right, I think. Maybe I shouldn't ask you a question if you haven't.
Yeah, I don't know about lawsuits. I mean, I had questions about just the whole way that was handled. There was no way there were 5 guilty people there that needed to be removed from the planning board.
Okay, I'll wait till you read the report for.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions, members of the media? All right, I guess we're done for today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Mr. Stevenson and Dr. Santiago, for joining us this morning. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.